Chapter 1. The Referral. I'm going to describe this as carefully as I can, in the order it happened, because the order matters. That's the thing about appraisal work that most people don't understand from the outside. It isn't about what you find. It's about the sequence in which you find things, and whether what you find in step 6 is consistent with what you measured in step 2. Inconsistency is the whole job. You're looking for it constantly, in every direction, the way a proofreader reads a document. You're not experiencing the property, you're auditing it. I've been doing this for 11 years, certified residential, licensed in 3 states, independent contractor for the last 4. My name is Deanna Voss. I'm telling you that because if this account ever matters to someone, if someone is reading it because they need it, I want them to know who measured these rooms. The referral came through Marcus Webb in the first week of October. I knew Marcus the way you know most agents in a regional market, by reputation, before you know them by face, and then well enough to work with, but not well enough to trust completely. He was productive, in his mid-40s, and ran a boutique firm out of a remodeled Victorian on the edge of downtown Harwick. Pleasant on the phone, always seemed to know something slightly ahead of everyone else in the transaction. The kind of agent who is either very well connected or very good at appearing that way, and you don't usually find out which until something goes wrong. The assignment was a single-family residential property on Cutter Mill Road, approximately 9 miles outside of Harwick proper in Aldenmere Township. The purpose of the appraisal was stated as purchase financing, a standard mortgage appraisal, the most common thing I do. 3-bedroom, 2-bath, 1,900 square feet of gross living area per the public record. Built in 1951. One owner of record since 1987, Gerald Ostrander, who had died 8 months prior, and whose estate was now selling the property to a buyer Marcus represented. Marcus had 2 instructions that he delivered at the end of our phone call, in the tone of a man mentioning minor administrative details. The first was that he needed the appraisal completed in a single site visit, not a single scheduled appointment, a single physical visit, meaning I should not plan to return for any reason. He framed this as a matter of estate timeline pressure, which is not uncommon when probate is involved. The second was that I should conduct my inspection independently and not coordinate with the listing agent, a woman named Paula Scheck, whose name appeared on the yard sign in the property photographs he'd sent. He said Paula was not reliable on details, and that any property questions I had should come directly to him. I noted both instructions. I didn't push back. At that point in October, I was 3 weeks out from a custody mediation that was going to cost me money I hadn't budgeted for, and Marcus Webb paid within 30 days, which in this business is nearly perfect. I pulled the public record on the Cutter Mill Road property that evening, the way I do with every assignment before I go out. It's preliminary research. I'm looking at the tax assessment, any prior appraisal history, permit records, sales history, and encumbrances. Background reading, The property's sales history showed a transaction in 1987 when Gerald Ostrander purchased it. Before that, a transaction in 1974. Before that, the original construction was in 1951. Between 1987 and the current year, there was nothing. No refinancing transactions, which would have required an appraisal. No building permits of any kind. No addition, no remodel. No deck permit. No HVAC replacement permit. No insurance loss claims on record. For 37 years, the property had existed in the public record the way furniture exists in a locked room. Present, presumably unchanged, and not examined by anyone with authority to document its condition. I noted this as slightly unusual,
attributed it to an elderly owner who'd paid off his mortgage and never needed to interact with the financial system again, and went to bed. Chapter 2. The Shell. I drove out to Cutter Mill Road on a Tuesday morning in early October, when the light was still good by 8 o'clock, and the air had the particular quality of late-season clarity that the upper Midwest gets before the cloud cover settles in for the winter. The property sat about a quarter-mile off the county road on a gravel driveway, surrounded by second-growth hardwood that was starting to turn. White farmhouse, 2 stories, hip roof with what looked like a small secondary roofline section on the northwest corner. Detached garage set back from the house to the east. Marcus had left a lockbox on the front door. I photographed it, recorded the combination in my site notes, and did not go inside. The first thing I do at any property is the exterior perimeter walk. Every time. The sequence is always the same. I start at the front left corner and move clockwise, taking measurements with the Leica at each wall face, noting window count and position, door count and position, foundation exposure height, roof pitch and condition, any additions or outbuildings, utility entry points. I sketch the exterior footprint as I go, building the shell before I ever open the front door. You can't trust an interior to tell you the truth about itself. The exterior is harder to lie about. The front face of the house measured 42 feet 3 inches. The right side measured 31 feet 8 inches. The rear face measured 42 feet 3 inches, consistent with the front. The left side was where I paused. The left side should have measured 31 feet 8 inches to match the right. It measured 41 feet 2 inches, nearly 10 feet longer. I went back and measured it twice more from 2 different start points. 41 feet 2 inches, both times. This was not an anomaly I was ready to discard. A 10-foot discrepancy between the left and right walls of a rectangular structure means one of 3 things. The structure is not rectangular. There is an addition that I missed in my initial visual pass. Or I was measuring incorrectly. I walked the left side again slowly. There was no additional seam visible in the clapboard siding. The foundation ran continuously without a transition point. The roofline, and here was the thing I had noted from the driveway, had that secondary section in the northwest corner, a small pitched volume that didn't obviously correspond to any room visible from the windows. From the exterior, it looks like an architectural feature, the kind of thing a designer adds to break up a roofline. But it was attached to the main structure, not decorative, and the siding beneath it continued in the same plane as the main wall. I sketched it carefully. 41 feet 2 inches on the left side, 31 feet 8 inches on the right. The northwest roofline section is approximately 12 feet wide and positioned at the far end of the longer dimension. I wrote in my site notes, exterior left side measurement anomaly. Investigate the interior for the corresponding space. Possible enclosed volume attached to main structure. Note for GLA reconciliation. Then I went in. Chapter 3. First interior pass. The house had been cleaned for showing. That specific kind of cleaned. Surfaces wiped. Carpets recently vacuumed with the lines still showing. A scent of something citrus adjacent from a plug-in somewhere that hadn't been unplugged. Personal items removed. No photographs on the walls. No mail on the counter. No shoes by the door. The furniture was still present. Mid-century pieces that had probably been in the house since the 70s. Covered in the particular patina of a long lifetime of use without replacement. An elderly man's house. Clean in the deep structural sense, everything in its place. Nothing that didn't belong. I started in the front living room and worked my way methodically. Measure the room, sketch it to scale, photograph all 4 walls, note ceiling height, window count, flooring condition, and any visible defects. I've done this so many times that the physical sequence is nearly automatic. Leica out, take the 2 long dimensions and the 2 short, record, sketch, move on. Living room, 14 by 22 feet. Dining area adjacent, open plan, 14 by 15. Kitchen, 12 by 18. Main floor bathroom, 8 by 6. The 2 bedrooms I could access on the main floor. First, 13 by 14. Second, 12 by 11. I was building my interior sketch in real time, fitting these rooms into the exterior shell I'd measured outside. The math was not working.
Main floor exterior footprint, approximately 1,680 square feet, adjusted for wall thickness. Interior rooms accounted for approximately 1,210 square feet. Difference, approximately 470 square feet. Standard wall thickness and mechanical space account for maybe 80 to 100 square feet of that difference in a house this size. I was looking at roughly 370 square feet of main floor space that my interior sketch could not locate. I stood in the central hallway and looked at my sketch. The hallway ran from the front of the house to the back, with bedroom doors off each side and the kitchen visible at the far end. To my left, at the midpoint of the hallway, there was a door. I had assumed, walking past it, that it was a closet. It had a standard hollow core door, the right height, the right width. But it had a deadbolt, not a passage lock with a thumb turn on the inside. A keyed deadbolt, the kind you install on an exterior door when you want to control who can open it from both sides. The keyring Marcus had left in the lockbox had 5 keys on it. I tried all 5. None of them fit. Pause. I photographed the door and its lock. I photographed its position in the hallway. I noted in my sketch that the door's position, if it opened onto a room, would place that room approximately where the exterior measurement had indicated unaccounted space. Then I called Marcus. Chapter 4. Marcus. He answered on the second ring. I told him I had a locked interior door I couldn't access, and that I needed either the key or documentation that the space was non-contributing and could be excluded from the GLA calculation. There was a pause, maybe 2 seconds, the kind of pause that a person makes when they've been expecting a question and are retrieving the prepared answer. That's the mechanical room, he said. Utility stuff, furnace lines, water shutoffs. It's not part of the living area. You can just note it as a mechanical space and leave it out. I said I could do that, but that a mechanical room of the size implied by the exterior measurements would need to appear on my sketch with a notation, and that the key ring didn't include access. I'll get you a key, he said, but it shouldn't hold up the report, just flag it, and we'll send the key before you finalize. I said I'd need to confirm the space dimensions eventually to complete the sketch accurately. Of course, he said. Absolutely. And then, in the same breath, how's everything else looking? I told him it was early and I'd let him know. After I hung up, I stood in the hallway with the phone in my hand and looked at the door. A mechanical room with a keyed deadbolt. Possible. Unusual. A simple privacy lock or a passage lock is standard for a utility space, and a keyed deadbolt implies you want to restrict access to people who might otherwise have a key to the house. But possible. What wasn't possible was the position. I had been building the floor plan sketch for 45 minutes. I knew the orientation of every exterior wall. The locked door was positioned on the interior wall of the hallway, which meant the room it opened onto had no exterior wall face. A mechanical room with no exterior access point. No wall where a utility entry could occur. No face where the furnace could vent to outside. No exposure where the water main could enter. I had been inside enough mechanical rooms to know that they require at least one exterior connection to function. A completely interior mechanical room was, structurally speaking, impossible. I wrote in my site notes, locked interior door, position inconsistent with mechanical room designation, no exterior wall correspondence, key not provided. See exterior NW measurement anomaly. Then I went downstairs. Chapter 5. The basement. The basement stairs were off the kitchen, a standard arrangement, door beside the refrigerator, light switch at the top. The staircase was open-sided, which I noted because it meant the basement space was not divided at the stair level. I could see most of the basement floor from the bottom of the stairs before I stepped off them. Poured concrete floor, 8-foot ceiling, tall for a 1951 basement, which typically ran lower. The furnace was against the south wall, a natural gas unit that had been replaced at some point in the last 20 years. Based on the manufacturer's label. Water heater beside it, also a replacement. Some open wire shelving along the east wall holds cardboard boxes and plastic storage bins, the kind of accumulation that happens over decades of occupancy. One small window on the south face, ground level. Normal. All of it is entirely normal. I measured the basement room by room the way I measure any level. Start at a corner, work clockwise. South wall 42 feet, east wall 29 feet, north wall 42 feet, west wall 23 feet 4 inches. I lowered the Leica and looked at the west wall. The basement exterior footprint should have reflected the left side exterior measurement. Approximately 41 feet. Even accounting for wall thickness, the basement's west wall interior face should have been somewhere in the 38 to 40 foot range. 23 feet, 4 inches. I measured it twice more. 23 feet, 4 inches, consistent across 3 measurements. The west basement wall was approximately 15 feet short of where it should have been. I turned my work light on the west wall. Standard drywall painted once in an institutional beige. The baseboard painted the same colour. The shelving unit against the east wall, I had noted it without examining it closely. I crossed the basement and looked at the west wall directly. Drywall. Even, smooth. The junction of the wall and ceiling was clear and well taped. The junction of the wall and floor was covered by baseboard trim. All of it looked installed and finished at the same time, consistent with each other, consistent with the rest of the basement. Except that I had done a dozen basements in houses of this era, and the 1951 vintage, if this wall was original, would have been poured concrete or concrete block, not drywall on framing. The south wall behind the furnace was poured concrete. The east wall was poured concrete. The north wall was poured concrete. The west wall was drywalled framing, installed after original construction. I ran my work light along the seam where the baseboard met the floor, moving from the south end of the wall toward the north. Near the midpoint of the wall, approximately where the shelving unit's center was positioned, I stopped. The paint sheen changed. It was subtle, the kind of thing you would never see in ambient light, and might not see with a work light held perpendicular to the surface, but at an angle, with the light raking across the baseboard at a shallow pitch, there was a seam. Not a stress crack, a seam. The baseboard in this 4-foot section was a separate piece, cut cleanly at both ends and installed to butt against the adjacent sections. The adjacent sections were continuous runs. This section was discrete. I pushed on it gently with 2 fingers. Nothing. I pushed with my palm. Nothing. I pushed at the top of the baseboard section, the upper edge where it met the drywall, with the heel of my hand. It moved, a fraction of an inch, then spring-loaded back, not a swinging panel, a panel that indicated give, which meant the section of baseboard was not glued or nailed in place. It was resting. I noted this in my sight notes without moving it further. Then I photographed it from 4 angles. Then I stood up and looked at the rest of the west wall from a distance. There was no seam in the drywall itself. Whatever was on the other side of this wall was not accessible through the removable baseboard section. The baseboard section was at most an access point for something at floor level. A chase, a pipe run, or a ventilation point, or a line of sight. I photographed the full west wall, the seam in the baseboard, the relationship between the wall's position and my sketch, and the measurement discrepancy note. Then I went back upstairs. Chapter 6. What the numbers spell. There is a specific moment in an appraisal when the individual measurements stop being individual measurements and become a single document. It happens at the sketch. You build the exterior shell, you fill in the interior rooms, and at some point you step back and look at the shape you've assembled, and either it is coherent or it isn't. I sat at the kitchen table with my sketch pad and my sight notes, and I looked at what I had. Exterior shell, left side measuring approximately 10 feet longer than the right, with a secondary roofline section at the northwest corner. Interior sketch. Rooms accounting for roughly 1,210 of the main floor's 1,680 square feet. Locked door in the hallway, position inconsistent with mechanical room designation. Basement west wall measuring 23 feet short of the exterior, with a baseboard seam indicating a covered access point at floor level. I mapped it. I drew the exterior shell accurately scaled on a fresh page and then filled in the rooms I had measured. The gap was immediate and obvious. Running along the left side of the house from front to back, there was a corridor of space approximately 20 feet long and varying between 18 and 24 inches wide on the main floor, widening at the northwest corner to roughly 12 by 14 feet, which corresponded to the roofline section. In the basement, the hidden space was wider, approximately 15 feet deep from the false west wall to the actual exterior. From the basement floor to the main floor to whatever was behind that locked hallway door to the northwest attic volume, the hidden space was continuous and vertical.
It ran the full height of the house. I sat with this for a long moment. An 18 to 24 inch space running vertically through a residential structure is wide enough to stand in, sideways, wide enough to move through, slowly. The basement section, at 15 feet deep, was wide enough to occupy with some degree of function, to put a chair in, to store things in, to sleep in, arguably, if you were accustomed to sleeping in a space that smelled of concrete and had no natural light. It was not insulation space. Standard wall insulation is 3 to 4 inches. Nobody builds 18 inches of insulation space. It was not mechanical. The furnace was in the main basement space, exposed and accessible. It was living space, in the narrow technical sense of being space large enough for a human body to occupy over time. Built into the house. Accessible, apparently, from the locked interior door, from a baseboard-level access point in the basement, and almost certainly from the attic volume that corresponded to the northwest roofline section. Someone had built a passage system inside this house, a vertical interior corridor, hidden behind finished walls, with internal access points concealed behind standard-appearing fixtures. I put my pen down. I looked at the baseboards in the kitchen. The baseboard against the left side wall, the side where the hidden corridor ran. The finished face of the baseboard was facing the wall. I blinked and looked again. Standard baseboard trim has a decorative profile on one face and a flat backing face on the other. You install it with the decorative profile facing into the room. The baseboard on the left kitchen wall had the flat backing face outward, toward the room, and the profiled face pressed against the wall. It was installed backward, from the other side. Someone had installed it while standing on the other side of the wall, finishing toward themselves. I looked at the baseboards in the dining room. Same thing. The left wall, the corridor side. Backward. I stood in the center of the kitchen, and I understood with the specific clarity that comes from having spent 11 years reading physical evidence of how spaces were built and used, that this passage had been in active use during the last renovation of this kitchen, that someone had been inside it while carpentry was being done, that this was not a relic, not a sealed-off historical artifact. The passage had been maintained. I called Marcus Webb. He didn't answer. I left no message. Chapter 7. She is not alone. I need to be careful about how I describe the next part, because I am aware of how it sounds, and I am not willing to describe it inaccurately in either direction. I went back to the basement. I told myself I was going back to complete the measurement protocol, to document the exact dimensions of the false west wall and the access point seam with the full detail my notes required. This was true. It was also true that I went back because I needed to know whether the space on the other side of that wall was empty. The basement was the same as I had left it. My measuring tape was still on the concrete floor near the west wall where I'd set it down. The work light was still positioned at the angle I'd used to find the baseboard seam. I crouched at the seam and looked at the baseboard section more carefully. Below the section, at floor level, there was a standard 4x10 HVAC floor register in the concrete, the type of register used to deliver forced air heating, a grill set flush in the floor with a metal frame. I had noted it as HVAC infrastructure and moved past it on my first pass. There was no ductwork below it. I lay flat on the concrete floor and looked through the register with my work light held at an angle. The light penetrated approximately 8 inches before the angle of the register louvers cut it off. But within those 8 inches, I could see the concrete base of the false wall's foundation, and beyond it, not light, but a space. A continuous darkness that extended further than the light could reach, which meant the space behind the false wall had depth. Real depth. The temperature was different at the register. The basement ambient was somewhere in the low 50s, which is standard for an unheated below-grade space in October in the upper Midwest. The air coming through the register was colder, not dramatically colder, 3 degrees, maybe 4, the kind of differential that a thermometer would confirm and that my face could only approximate, but consistently colder, which meant the space behind the wall was not drawing from the same thermal source as the rest of the basement. It was sealed from the heated zone of the house. It was an unconditioned space. I was noting this, lying on my side on a concrete basement floor with my clipboard, measuring the register dimensions and sketching its position relative to the baseboard seam, when I heard the sound. I want to be precise. It was not a drip. It was not a pipe tick. It was not the furnace cycling. Those are sounds I have learned to identify and discount automatically after 11 years in mechanical spaces. This was a sustained sound, approximately 2 to 3 seconds in duration, with a soft friction quality. The sound cloth makes against concrete when something wrapped in cloth moves across a rough surface. Long and slow, and then stopping. I did not move. The silence after the sound was complete. The furnace was not running. There was no wind audible from the window. I could hear my own breathing, which I was controlling carefully, and the sound of my heartbeat in my ears, which I was less able to control. I counted, silently in my head, the way I count measurement repetitions. 1, 2, 3, 4. 40 seconds of silence. Then the sound resumed. Same quality, same duration, but it came from a different position. I am spatially competent. I have been orienting myself in 3-dimensional space by sound and measurement for over a decade. The first sound had come from the south end of the wall. The second came from approximately the center. Something behind the wall had moved. I stood up slowly and without making a noise. I picked up my clipboard and my work light, and I walked up the basement stairs, and I came out in the kitchen, and I did not go back to the basement. I stood in the kitchen for approximately 1 minute. My hands were steady. That surprised me, and I noted it the way I note everything, with a kind of clinical detachment that I think is how my brain handles information it doesn't have a category for. What I knew? There was something behind a wall that had been deliberately constructed to conceal it. That thing was currently moving. What I didn't know, what it was, how long it had been there, and whether it knew I had heard it. I had work to do upstairs. I went upstairs. Chapter 8. The Attic Record. The second floor had a short hallway with 2 bedrooms and a bathroom. I measured and sketched all 3 quickly, with the kind of focused efficiency I use when I want to finish a room and move to the next thing, and not think about what I heard in the basement. The measurement discrepancies on the second floor were consistent with the main floor. The corridor ran through here too, corresponding to a section of wall in the larger bedroom that showed the same baseboard installation anomaly I'd found in the kitchen. Backward, finished toward the other side. The attic access hatch was in the master bedroom closet. Standard pull-down stairs, spring-loaded, the kind that folds in 3 sections. I pulled it down and went up. The attic was wrong immediately. Not in a dramatic way, in a specific, professional way. I have learned to read spaces by their physical evidence of use. A 1951 house that has not had a permitted renovation in 37 years should have an attic that shows 37 years of the specific entropy that attics accumulate. Insulation that is settled and shifted from the heat cycling and foot traffic of prior HVAC work. Dust in patterns that reflect air movement. The evidence of rodents that found entry through the roofline over decades. The occasional dead bat near a ridge vent. This attic had none of that. The insulation lay even and undisturbed. No prints, no rodent tracks, no bat remains. The dust on the plywood decking was light and recent, not decades of accumulation. The exposed rafters were clean. Whatever happened in this attic happened at intervals, in a way that left the space maintained and functional and essentially free of the biological record that an unoccupied space always accumulates. The attic had been regularly cleaned. The secondary roofline section was at the far end, accessed by walking the decking the length of the main attic. It was triangulated off the main structure by a low knee wall, approximately 4 feet high, with a small door set into it, a standard attic knee wall access door, the kind used for storage. This one had a hook and eye latch on the outside. I unhooked it and opened it. The triangular space behind the knee wall was the top of the vertical corridor I had been mapping from below. It was approximately 12 feet square at its widest, and ceiling height sloped down from 5 feet at the knee wall to the roof decking. Concrete floor, not plywood decking, but poured concrete, which required deliberate construction. Some finished drywall sections on the interior faces. A small mechanical fixture I didn't immediately recognize was mounted to one of the rafters, approximately the size and shape of a smoke detector, but without a visible indicator light or test button. In the corner, where the triangular space's longest wall met the knee wall, there was a flat wooden box. Unfinished pine, approximately the size and shape of a document box, with a small brass clasp on the front. I photographed it before I opened it. Inside was a set of hand-drawn floor plans. They were drawn on drafting paper that had yellowed to the specific amber of documents from the 1950s. The plans showed this house, not the house as the public record described it, with 3 bedrooms and 2 baths in a standard residential footprint. The plans showed the house as it actually existed, with the vertical corridor system fully drawn, dimensioned, and labelled. The passage along the left side, the widened northwest section on each floor, the basement space behind the false wall, the attic volume I was currently sitting in. There were 3 layers of annotation: the original drafting in a precise architectural hand from what I estimated was the original construction era, a second layer of corrections and measurements in a different hand, different ink, darker, with the specific ballpoint characteristic of the 1970s or 1980s, updating dimensions and noting what appeared to be construction modifications. And a third layer, in pencil, more recent, based on the instrument's precision, that had updated the access points and noted something in the basement I hadn't found. What the pencil annotation labelled as lower east panel, with a small arrow indicating a location against the basement's east wall, behind the shelving unit. 3 different hands, across an estimated span of 70 years. On the oldest sheet, in the lower right corner, where a standard architectural drawing would show the architect's name and date, there was a name: Harlan Ostrander, 1951. The same family. Gerald Ostrander, the man who died 8 months ago, had been the last in the line that went back to the original construction. They hadn't inherited a house with a hidden passage. They had built the passage into the house from the beginning, and they had maintained it, updated it, and carefully documented it across 3 generations. I put the plans back in the box. I closed the clasp. I took 6 photographs of each sheet before I closed it. Then I latched the knee wall door from the outside, descended the attic stairs, returned them to their folded position, and walked downstairs, through the kitchen, out the front door, and to my car. Chapter 9. Marcus Webb's Other Job. I sat in the car for a while. The trees at the edge of the gravel driveway were bright with October colour, and the sky above them was that particular shade of Midwestern October blue that is so clear it almost seems constructed. It was a beautiful morning. I had been inside that house for approximately 3 hours. I turned the heat on because I was cold in a way that wasn't entirely about the temperature. I put my clipboard on the passenger seat and looked at the sketch I'd built over 3 hours of measured work. A vertical corridor system, running the full height of a residential structure, built in 1951, maintained across 3 generations of a single family, currently occupied by something that moved in it. I thought about the backward baseboards. The person who installed them had been working from inside the passage, which meant that during the last kitchen renovation, whenever that was, based on the material date of the cabinet hardware, the late 1980s or early 1990s, someone had been occupying the passage while finish carpentry was being done around them. I thought about the floor plans. 3 generations of updates in 3 different hands, carefully maintained in a document box in the attic. This wasn't something shameful that one person had built and hidden. This was something that had been passed down, maintained, improved, and documented. It was managed infrastructure, institutional in the family sense of that word. I thought about Gerald Ostrander, dead 8 months, and about who came after him. I opened the state real estate license database on my phone and searched for Marcus Webb. He appeared immediately. Licensed, current, firm address in Harwich. The associated information showed his broker of record, his firm name, and his license issue date. I searched the property address on the county assessor's website and pulled the full ownership history. Gerald Ostrander purchased one in 987. Previous owner, Howard Ostrander, from 1974. Previous owner, Harlan Ostrander. Original construction, 1951. I searched Marcus Webb's name against the Ostrander estate case number I found in the probate records attached to the property. A search that took me about 4 minutes to complete on my phone, because I have done this kind of records work before when a chain of title looks wrong. Marcus Webb was listed in the estate documents as a nephew of Gerald Ostrander. Not the estate administrator, a beneficiary, listed as receiving personal property and professional assets per the deceased's instruction. He was family. He was not the listing agent. He was not representing a buyer. He was the estate's internal agent, marketing the property within the family network. He was the person the family had appointed to manage the transaction, which meant he was the person the family had appointed to manage the appraisal. I thought about his instructions. Single visit. Don't coordinate with the listing agent. The listing agent, Paula Scheck, was external, not family. If Paula had been present during my inspection, she might have asked questions, seen my sketch developing, noticed me measuring the west basement wall, noticed my face when the numbers didn't reconcile. A second set of eyes in the property was a risk the family couldn't manage, so Marcus had removed her from the process by telling me she was unreliable and to work around her. I thought about the referral documentation Marcus had given me at the start of the assignment. There had been a prior appraisal attempt noted at the bottom of the file, in small type, in the category labelled Prior Appraisal History. The notation said, Previous appraisal, voided. Appraiser withdrew without documented cause. I had read it as professional flakiness. I had assumed the previous appraiser had personal reasons for withdrawing, a scheduling conflict, a personal emergency, the kind of undocumented void that happens when someone takes on too much work and drops an assignment. I did not assume that anymore. Someone else had been inside that house with a tape measure and a Leica, and had found what I found, and had filed a void and said nothing. The way I was sitting in a car on a gravel driveway, currently contemplating filing a void and saying nothing. Because what was the alternative? I had measurements that didn't reconcile. I had floor plans I'd found in an attic. I had a sound I'd heard behind a wall. None of this was a police report. None of this was a crime I could describe, name, and document in a way that any authority would receive as actionable. What I had were an appraiser's notes. What I had was a discrepancy between the inside and outside of a house that no one official would consider remarkable, until the discrepancy was placed inside a framework that someone official was willing to build. And I had a custody mediation in 3 weeks. I started the car and drove back toward Harwich. Chapter 10. The Supplemental Record. I filed the void that afternoon. Official language, clean form, no explanation of cause. Appraiser declined to complete. Client instruction interfered with inspection protocol. Access to all spaces was not provided. This was accurate. Marcus had instructed me not to return, which meant I could not complete the inspection, which meant I could legitimately void the report. The form asked for no further explanation, and I gave none. I sent the 17 photographs of the floor plans, every sheet, every annotation, every dimension noted in 3 different hands across 70 years, to one person. Her name is Rhonda Capel. She ran the appraisal firm I worked at before I went independent. She has been in this business for 23 years. She is careful, competent, and not easily alarmed. And she has a storage drive at home that is not connected to her work network. My message to her said, "Keep these somewhere that isn't your work email. I'll explain when I can." She replied, "Okay." She did not ask questions. That is one of the things I have always appreciated about Rhonda. I did not go to the police. I have thought about this decision at length, and I want to explain it, not justify it. I had no proof of a crime. I had a measurement discrepancy and some photographs I'd taken in an attic. The floor plans were not labelled crime scene. The space behind the wall had no body in it that I had seen. I had heard a sound. I had felt cold air through a register. I had found a 70-year-old set of floor plans showing a construction layout that was not in the public record. These are not components of a crime report. They are components of an appraiser's site notes, and an appraiser's site notes describing things she heard and smelled are not sworn testimony. What I knew with professional certainty was that a family had built and maintained a hidden interior passage system in a residential property across 3 generations, and that they had attempted to sell that property and had engaged an appraiser they expected to sign off without finding what I found. I knew a previous appraiser had been in the property and had also filed a void. I knew that Marcus Webb was the estate's family, not a neutral agent.
What I didn't know, and still don't know, and this is the part I sit with, is what the passage was for. What it had housed over 70 years and 3 generations. What was behind the wall on the morning I was there, moving in the cold dark. I didn't go back to find out. That's the part of this account that I've had to make a certain peace with. I'm a residential appraiser. I measure rooms. I reconcile numbers. I document what exists and compare it against what is claimed. I did my job, and my job showed me something that the family selling the property had spent 7 decades making sure no appraiser would see. And then I left. Pause. 3 weeks after I filed the void, a new referral came into my email. Different email address than Marcus Webb's. Different client name. A man named Dennis Farrell, whom I didn't recognize. Different county, 40 miles south of Harwick. The property address was on a rural route in Saline Township. I searched the property in the county assessor's database. Last sale, 1989. Original construction, 1954. No financial activity between 1989 and the present. No permits, no refinancing, no insurance claims. 35 years of institutional silence. I searched Dennis Farrell's name in the state real estate license database. He did not appear. The referral email was professional in format and language. It mentioned my specialization in rural residential properties. It mentioned Marcus Webb's name, not as a reference, but in passing, as someone who had spoken highly of my work. It offered a fee that was 30% above my standard rate. I have not responded to it. I've been sitting with the email for 11 days now. I don't know who Dennis Farrell is. I don't know if the property in Saline Township has a corridor system in its walls, or if it's exactly what it appears to be, an elderly owner's rural property quiet for decades, now in an estate sale. What I know is that someone found me through my professional network. Someone who knows Marcus Webb, someone who does not appear in the license database of the state where they are claiming to conduct real estate transactions. Someone who offered me money to go out, alone, to a property with 35 years of institutional silence in its records. And I know that I am very good at my job. That's the part that keeps me awake. Not the corridor or the sound behind the wall or the box of floor plans in 3 different hands. It's this. Whatever this family has been doing for 70 years, they have needed appraisers. They have needed people with tape measures and laser distance tools, and the professional authority to document interior space. They have needed them at intervals when a property moves within the estate, when a transaction requires verification, when someone official needs to certify that the inside matches the outside. And they have found a way each time to make sure that the appraiser who goes in either doesn't find it or finds it and says nothing. I found it. I said nothing officially. I filed a void, kept photographs, and sent them to a woman I trust and drove home, which means from a certain perspective I am exactly what they needed. Chapter 11. What's left? I'm writing this in my kitchen on a laptop with the exterior doors locked. My daughter is at her father's this week, which I'm grateful for, because I have been poor company since October, and she is 9 years old and does not need to absorb whatever is coming off me right now. I am not afraid of the house on Cutter Mill Road. I have not been back. I will not go back. What I'm afraid of, and I'm going to say this precisely because precision is what I have, is that the house on Cutter Mill Road was not an isolated thing. The family that built it had a reason to build it that extended beyond that specific property. That 37 years of institutional silence times one property was a strategy, and that the same strategy applied to a property in 1989 in Saline Township suggests a pattern. I'm afraid that the previous appraiser who filed a void without documented cause was managed the same way I was managed, and that the management was successful in both cases, and that what I did, file a void, say nothing officially, keep photographs on a personal drive, was exactly within the range of outcomes the family had planned for. I'm afraid that the unregistered man named Dennis Farrell knows my name, because the appraisal network is not as private as I assumed it was. I'm afraid that being very good at my job is not a protection. That is, in fact, the quality that makes me useful to them, and that usefulness is a different category than safe. I typed this out because I needed there to be a record somewhere that was not a professional form, not a void filing, not a standard report. A record that says, I went to a house. I measured it. The inside didn't match the outside. I know what I measured. I know what I heard. I know what I found in a box in an attic in a space that wasn't supposed to exist. If someone is reading this because they needed the measurements, the numbers are in the notes I sent to Rhonda Capel. She has them. She knows where they are. She is careful, and she does not ask questions. And she has been in this business for 23 years, without flinching. If you are reading this for any other reason, I don't know what to tell you, except that I have not responded to Dennis Farrell's email. Not yet. Ending and sting. The void report sat in the county appraisal database the way all void reports sit. Clean, anonymous, professionally inert. No one called to ask why. Marcus Webb sent one follow-up email asking about the timeline, and when I didn't respond, the property went back to market without an appraisal on record, which someone with authority to ask questions might have found strange, and which no one did. Rhonda Capel has the photographs. I have the site notes. The house on Cutter Mill Road is listed at $289,000 and has been showing for 6 weeks without a contract. I told my daughter the last time I had her for the weekend that I might take a break from rural property work. She said okay without looking up from her homework. She has her father's ability to accept information without asking for more than she needs. I'm grateful for that. I don't have an answer for the question she didn't ask. I got a second email from Dennis Farrell. Same professional format, same above market fee, a different property address, this one in a different county entirely, 3 hours south. I searched it. Original construction 1947, last financial transaction 1991, 33 years of silence. I've started keeping a log, not because I plan to do anything with it, because I was trained to document discrepancies, and what I have here, assembled across 3 properties and 2 email addresses, an avoided report with a predecessor void that preceded mine, is a discrepancy, a pattern, the kind of thing you write down when the numbers don't reconcile, the kind of thing you write down because someday someone is going to need to know that the inside didn't match the outside, and that someone who measured it was here. The 3rd email from Dennis Farrell arrived this morning. It opened. We understand you prefer rural properties with longer sales histories. We have several. I don't know what "we" means. I know that I have not told anyone, anywhere, that I prefer rural properties with longer sales histories. That is not a preference I have ever stated. That is a pattern someone extracted from looking at which assignments I have accepted. Someone has been reading my professional record the way I read a property record, looking for what the history says about what's inside,